It's time for Technology Now. Brian Marshall of VNet is joining us now, hoping to make sure each time we sit down here to talk that we don't become victims of scammers, because they are really crafty these days.
Yeah, so I mean, we just talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We're talking about it again because Newsweek just had their article. You know, we're talking about over $1 trillion was taken from people with scams.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that your viewers aren't falling victim to that. So we thought we should revisit this one more time and make sure that we're being very prepared.
We call it smishing,
right? Because that's SMS, right? That's text messaging, right?
Okay.
I think tishing doesn't sound right, so we call it
Right.
smishing. It's SMS messaging. Basically, that's that text message that comes to your phone that is trying to get you to do something that you wouldn't necessarily normally do. I think the most common one for me in the last 2 weeks has been the PA tolls, right?
Yes.
The toll people never send you text messages, but there's an assumption you're out driving. You may have gone through one of those things. Now that there's cameras everywhere that get your car, you might get a notification you have to pay a toll. So you get this message saying that you've got a toll violation, and if you don't pay it right now, then you're gonna, it'll be $50 instead of $5. Well, all of a sudden it's like, well, I'll pay $5 and I pay $50. It's a really easy way to become a target. And maybe the best case scenario is you don't do anything. But maybe you click on that link and just pay the $5, you're out $5. But likely you've now given them your credit card number or something, and now you've got a giant mess on your hands.
Right.
It's all really bad.
So anything that comes into you, unfortunately now, we need to be suspect of.
Every single time. We're just not that popular.
Yeah.
So when we're getting these messages, even if we're a little lonely or whatever they're coming in, we almost need to ignore them. If I'm not expecting it, I just ignore it.
I've gotten the Turnpike ones too, and they do fool you. But then in my research, that there was just a couple letters off in the spelling. Something was a little janky. Something was a little off.
You look reading it, and it's a PA Turnpike dot, but then when you're reading it, it's like not quite exactly what it's going to be there. Because if it was perfect, then when you clicked on it, you would go to the actual site. If you went to the actual site, there'd be nothing bad to happen. My rule of thumb is never click on a link that you get. If you want to go check out your PA tolls, go to your Easy Pass and log in. If you have a problem with your Gmail account, go to your Gmail account and log in. Don't use that easy button. Don't use that link. Don't use that thing that's going in there.
Right.
And it's okay to ignore it.
And don't panic. Yeah, it's nothing that, especially if they're saying we need it right now, that should be a red flag. What about these random strangers that just kind of tap into maybe your iMessage and just say, hey, how are you? What do you do with those?
Again, I know it's hard to do, but you've just got to ignore it. The second you say, I'm great, how are you? They now know you're there.
Gotcha.
They call it a fish out of line, right? They call this phishing for a reason. If I've got you and I know that you're real and you're willing to engage, if I'm a bad actor, you're an easy target. Now I can start going back and forth and trying to get you to do something that's abnormal. It used to think it was polite. Hey, Bob. Well, I'm not Bob. Let me I'm sorry, you've got the wrong number. This is Brian. Well, now I've opened up a giant can of worms.
Right.
You're not being rude. Just ignore it. It's unlikely a person at the other side. It's probably just a bot.
Should you expect that as well if you get a text message? I've had these before where it's a clear text that's clearly not to me, it's to somebody else. And I have said, I believe you have the wrong number. Should we just ignore those?
You just got to ignore it.
Ignore those too, yeah.
Listen,
don't be nice anymore, people. There's no more Mr. Nice Guy.
I'm never going to have a little 1 or a 2 or a 5 on my messages. They're all going to be red. I'm not one of those people that leaves a bunch on red messages. Yeah. But it doesn't mean you got to answer. So you see it, you delete it, you can block the number.
Right.
It's not for you, just ignore it.
And they are tricky. Sometimes we had one come through our email system, and it was linked to a person that we know professionally that sends us, news releases all the time. You just have to really be careful. I remember thinking, this is odd. Why am I getting this? And sure enough, he was hacked.
Right. Because it's odd, right?
Because it's odd.
Your gut is almost never wrong, right? So if your gut is telling you that it doesn't seem right, follow your gut. If you're such a nice person that your gut tells you it's always going to be good, then ignore your gut and just trust Brian and make sure you don't do that.
Exactly. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Thanks,
sure.
Brian. It's always great to talk to you about these. And don't become a victim. Stay right here with